Very good morning to everyone. My name is Ruth Mallers-Ray and I am the chair of the Strategic Advisory Board for the Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute. It's really great to have so many of you online this morning. So as I mentioned, I have over the last 2 years been chairing the Strategic Advisory Board for AMPI, which has been an amalgamation of industry, local government and academia, offering some challenge, some insight and a just broad advice to the programme beyond its sort of consortia partners. And, the last 2 years has been really informative to me about machinery, and I know I'm speaking to everybody who knows that machinery matters, but for me, it matters in 3 really key areas. One, it matters in its own right. It is something that you're going to hear about. It's worth about 500 to 600 million a year in the UK. It matters in its own right. It also matters as an enabler to the broader manufacturing industry. As we, go through industrial strategy development with a new government in power, the considerations of what the manufacturing industry can deliver to the economy is being discussed. And yet, if we don't have a very strong machinery capability in the UK, we will continue to import machinery and it will start to negate some of that manufacturing output. So machinery matters to underpin the manufacturing industry, and machinery matters to create its own economic output to the UK. And finally, and Ian will certainly be touching on this, there's something about a more resilient manufacturing supply chain, whether that's in our materials base, our machinery base, or manufacturing. And I, for one, am on a sort of treadmill of some description, constantly asking people to say it's materials, machinery, and manufacturing. It's the 3 M's. It's not just the 2. And so we need the manufacturers to talk to the machinery organisations, and we're going to hear from Ian of BAE about that. We need them to articulate their direction of travel and their requirements to steer machinery developers in the right direction. We need the machinery network to promote themselves, to shout more clearly as a network to articulate their capabilities, products and services. We need the academic community to respond to those industrial challenges, to be part of the solution, both in terms of machinery developments, but also as a skills provider. And lastly, we need the mechanisms that can put the prime to the SMEs with academia, or whatever combination is needed. Machinery, in my view, needs a voice to represent the diversity of machinery, to steer and direct this network, and it needs an AMPI. And today we're going to be hearing about AMPI and machinery from multiple directions. So our first speaker today is Ian Minton, who is the Director of Technology Capability in BAE Systems. And Ian is going to give us a macro view on why machinery is mission critical to the UK. Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Ruth, and thanks, Gareth and Dan, for inviting me. So, as Ruth said, I've been a member of the AMPI Strategy Advisory Board since its creation, probably about 18 months or a bit more ago. And very much echoing Ruth's comments there, machinery is very key to me in terms of what my job needs. But also, I just want to take some time and show why it's key to us all. So, over the past 100 or so years in the UK, our role has evolved. Our life has changed very much for the better, be that in transport, in goods, in buildings, in health, in lifestyles. They've all come on leaps and bounds than they were in the 1920s and before that. And all that's been driven by industrial activity. We talk about the Industrial Revolution. It's continued, hasn't it? We all love travelling on holiday, going by bus, train, car, boat. They all need to be made. They all need machines to make the actual vehicles. We need machines to assemble them. We want them to be safe. We want them to be plentiful. So they need to have the frequency of build, the cost to build, the quality we build. We also are very much, as per this webinar, increasingly connected digitally. We need to make equipment. We need to install networks. We need to build communication towers. And as we're all hearing and seeing, even the most basic things are also key. Our sanitation, our energy sources, our supply of heating, food, water, drink, shelter. All of that has grown, it's come on immensely over the last 100 years or more, but it's needed for our country to be able to make strides forward. We all like to have a better standard of living, and those are all key to helping us get there. And what's that got to do with AMPI? Well, unfortunately, over those 100 years, our provision of those machines, our provision of those components, that element has dropped by at least a quarter since the 1940s. So that means we're importing more. And if I don't make the cars, the batteries, the washing machines in the UK, why do I need to buy the machines from the UK? Therefore, that machinery sector has also dropped significantly in that period. You add to that, and I'm coming from this in a defence company, recent experience through 2020 for all of us has shown that our supply chains, the where we get things from, are not as robust as we hoped. Remember back to the pandemic and the threat of where a toilet roll's coming from. Well, never really thought there was a problem until actually somebody said there was an issue. We had ships blocking the Suez Canal. That meant that all sorts of goods didn't arrive in time. We've got, unfortunately, a lot of conflicts in the world at the moment. And we also have a lot of economic tariffs occurring, whether it's China or the US or Taiwan or wherever. All of that is impacting where we get our goods from, how available is it, and how much does it cost? And all of that has an impact in the UK in how we are able to grow. And really, AMPI is important because it gives us the ability to grow for ourselves. It gives us the machinery that allows us to manufacture, that allows us to grow our area. It's not just the machinery, though. It's also the skills base. So I've worked in the aerospace sector for my entire career. I can count on one hand the number of UK-sourced robots, lathes, milling machines, autoclaves, ply cutters, you name it. There's very, very few that are UK provided. And yet these are imperative to us in aviation. We're moving towards net zero. That means we're looking at electric power. Where do I get my motors from? How do I build them in the quantity that I need? We've got lots of things in the news around drones, may they carrying medical supplies, prescriptions, or just Amazon dropping your parcels off. Where are we going to make these drones? How are we going to get them in the volume we need? How are we going to go through? That's a big burgeoning market. The use of hydrogen on planes, that will come. That needs new materials, that needs new ways of working, new development. That's an opportunity to grow. That's an opportunity for us to go into machinery in a different way. And then you've got the traditional areas. Well, how are they growing that new machine technology? How does digital twins come in? And how does that mean that I can now manufacture across the world differently? How do I also then make it safe? These are all questions we're trying to solve. And unfortunately, we're trying to solve it with machinery sourced from abroad. If we want to have control over our prices and our availability, if we want to have high-skilled jobs, then we need that machinery base in the UK. That allows us to get higher skilled people. That allows us to have higher wages, higher living standards, but it also allows us to be masters of our own destiny. It really is imperative to us in the defence sector that we can get hold of what we want when we need it. And by that, I mean we're not beholden to another country deciding whether we should or should not be able to. So for us, machinery in the UK is important. But hopefully you heard from this, machinery is important to all of us in every walk of life. Whether you're using your iPhone, whether you're driving in the car, whether you're going shopping, machinery is key to what you eat, what you drink, what you use day to day. So it really is important that we build on this sector and we grow it. So hopefully today's webinar will give you thought, will help you learning more about the sector, will help us, as Ruth said, connect up academia, SME, and bring people passionate to the sector together and help us work out how we rebuild this capability for the future.
Many thanks, Ian. Much appreciated. And as I mentioned, when I introduced Ian, it was going to be a sort of macro view and just the sort of criticality of collaboration, not just in the actual R&D per se, but also in our future thinking, our direction of travel, and sort of moving to a place of defining who we or you as the machinery community really want to be and what you need around you to make that happen. So we're now going to hear from Aaron Holt, a fabulous title, describes himself as a Yorkshire entrepreneur, which I think is just ace beyond belief. But he's also chief exec of Holson. And Aaron's going to provide us with a view of the machine tool market from his side of the fence, so to speak, the benefits that AMPI has brought to Holson, and some thoughts on how to address some of the challenges and opportunities within this market. A very warm welcome, and over to you, Aaron.
Cheers, thanks, Ruth. Next slide, please. So yeah, so I guess there's some people on this meeting who are unlucky enough to know me, but for those who don't, a little bit of background. So I grew up in West Yorkshire around Kirklees. Travelled quite a lot in a previous job, but I originally kind of had my childhood in a little village called Hepworth near Firth, where they filmed Last of the Summer Wine. And in the village there was a mill, which these photographs are from a little mission me and the lads had where we broke in one time before they knocked it down. So I think growing up in and around this area where, you know, there's a lot of textile industry heritage, back when I was at school, you know, they were all in use. And then, you know, coming into my early 20s, a lot of them kind of slowly dying out, really. But I do remember us sneaking in. There was a emergency exit around the back where if you kicked it hard enough, it actually opened. So we used to go in as lads. And the scale of some of the kit in there, and, you know, quite almost, it was exciting, but it was quite scary, really, because it was, you know, big lumps of metal, stuff buzzing away even on a night. And I remember, you know, being quite intimidated by the scale of it, really. So it's probably where one of the original fascinations with engineering came from, I think, for me. But, you know, it's been clear around this area here, especially in West Yorkshire, you know, the level of decline from a market like the textile industry, which is actually probably the source of most of the, you know, modern day style of machinery powered by electrics in order to support that market. So next slide, please. So some statistics, which I think are interesting and set the scene. So we're known for being incredibly good at early stage innovation. And, you know, we ranked first for academic publications in that field in the G7. We have huge presence from our universities, world renowned. People, you know, travel and come here to learn from the best of the best. What that doesn't seem to do is potentially follow through into long-term commercialization opportunities. So again, we rank 4th in venture capital investment. I think we're actually only 18th in the world or somewhere thereabouts for our machine tool market. So, you know, we're getting more investment for potentially short-term opportunities or in different sectors than the one that we're looking at and talking about here today. As a percentage of GDP, we spend significantly less than some of the main players. And we have, you know, we're one of the largest sources of exports of IP, especially in Europe, but pretty much in the world when you consider how good we are at coming up with the initial kind of concepts, proof of concept, and then moving on to early validation of products. At that point, we're notoriously bad.
Have we just lost Aaron?
Yes, I think so.
I think we might be having some technical difficulties there.
Okay, let's just give him 1 second, see if he comes back. It's very tedious, isn't it? Dan, are you able to talk to Aaron's slides at all?
Yes, I can do. Or we can come back to this at the end, as after this he has a case study that's pretty pertinent for the final section of today's webinar as well. Okay,
so why don't we try and do that then? So Dan, we're going to thank you very much, everybody, for being really patient with us as we just navigate this sort of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip over to Dan Brooks, and Dan is going to talk to us about where we are on AMPI, a pilot on a bespoke machinery-focused call to action, and where we're at. So, and Dan has just recently been appointed the director of the Institute. So congratulations to you on that, Dan. And this is going to make a real difference in terms of focus and effort. But over to you, Dan, on AMPI and machinery matters.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And good morning. Thank you all again for joining us today and for being patient with any issues we have. Good old technology, eh? So as Ruth said, I'm Dan Brooks. I am Institute Director for the Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute. I'm going to build on everything we've heard from Ian and briefly from Aaron today. So I'm going to talk to you about the challenges in the industry, the successes and the lessons we've learned from our pilot innovation program, and then finally our understanding of what we think the sector needs moving forward. I'm going to also pause a number of points to seek input and feedback through a number of polls and questions from you all throughout as well. Before I start, I just want to define what we mean when referring to advanced machinery. So machinery can be considered anything really these days, from the mobile phone in your pocket to the coffee machine at home. However, we are specifically talking about machinery for manufacturing. So equipment, systems used for manufacturing, production, and other complex operations, often and hopefully more regularly, including innovative technologies to improve, things like efficiency, accuracy, productivity, and sort of other elements of industrial processes. So that machinery for manufacturing phrase is really, really important. Oh, sorry. So I'd first like to continue on from Ian and Aaron and set the scene and take a look at where we are as an industry, sort of building on some key facts and figures that have recently been reported by the MTA and the Institute of Manufacturing. The impact of all manufacturing on UK GDP was more than 500 billion in 2022, and it supported more than 7 million jobs. The machinery and equipment sector, which covers a wide-ranging definition of machinery and supporting technologies, contributed about 12.5 billion. But this is a slight decline from 2008, where it contributed just a bit more than 13. We are the 5th largest machinery producer, which is a good deal smaller than the US, Germany, and Japan, but it does demonstrate what I think we all know, that we have good strengths to build on. However, these strengths translate into us being the 10th largest machinery and equipment exporter in the world. But crucially, we have one of the largest trade deficits, not just of the leading countries I've mentioned, but of any country in the world. This deficit has more than tripled between 2011 and 2022, leaving us languishing in 176 out of 188 in the global machinery trade balance. To put that into context, the UK imported $49 billion worth of machinery in 2022. That's 7 billion more than we exported, whereas Germany exported 102 billion more than they imported. So that really is a stark contrast and highlights how far we are behind. And whilst, and Ruth mentioned earlier, whilst advanced machinery is arguably just a fraction of this, contributing about 100 million to the UK, it's one of the highest value components of that industry, both in itself, but also as an enabler for more technologically advanced manufacturing capabilities that we all strive for. Machinery will always be at the heart of manufacturing and plays an integral cross-sectorial role in enabling manufacturing innovation. Now, look, we can cite things like high production costs and political uncertainty as factors here, but those numbers highlight both the domestic UK demand for machinery in general and also the export opportunity that the UK could tap into that some of our competitors have done. So right now is a really opportune moment to make a bold move. On one hand, the current challenges such as geopolitical uncertainty result in more UK manufacturers looking domestically for suppliers. And Ian very well articulated some of the challenges we've all seen over the last few years related to that. On the other hand, new sort of global industries and technology trends are emerging with such different needs that may not be available through the big established machine builders in some of our competitor countries. Things such as green technologies with batteries and hydrogen, and advanced material processing with graphene and complex 3D printing. And these are all areas where arguably there's no clear world leader in machinery, but where the UK is well positioned thanks to pockets of incredible expertise that exist and that could be directed towards these challenges with the right guidance and support. We are, as the UK, we are a global research hub, as Aaron touched on. There are more publications here per capita than any other country in the world, and more overall, actually, except China and the US. But the manufacturing sector is increasingly reliant on imported machinery technology and service contracts going forward from that. This impedes UK-led development and exploitation. You know, developing machinery is a high-cost activity, which you will all know, and it often requires perhaps more upfront capital than other technology developments, such as digital tech, as I suppose we see very often these days. It's also a high-skill industry where it can take so many years to become competent in designing and building precision machines. And even to consider such investments, machine companies, particularly SMEs, need to be confident there's a viable application and market. You know, many of the machinery sector's leading players, such as, you know, from Germany and the US, they excel at this because they're often part of large companies or groups with capital reserves and wide-ranging in-house expertise. The vast majority of the UK machinery community is smaller SMEs who simply can't move at that pace without targeted support. And it's this support that I'd like to focus on for the rest of this webinar. In 2019, a group of industrialists, research leaders and policymakers in the northwest of England came together in response to these challenges with the aim of rejuvenating the sector and doing things differently. The solution was the Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute, an industry-defined initiative to stimulate and grow the UK's advanced machinery sector. So developed in partnership with industry, with government, with a variety of research institutes and universities, AMPI was created to deliver an enduring institute that provides industry with better access to machinery expertise and supports companies to deliver that next generation of technologies. Our overarching objectives with this were to increase the competitive and productivity, of course, but also to improve innovation, to improve supply chain connectivity, to enable the wider manufacturing sector to access and collaborate with the expertise that we all know exist and that brings wider benefits to the sector. And all that will hopefully lead to the increase in commercialization of new machines and technologies and know-how, and ultimately drive an increase in industry R&D spend, and the result being increase in job opportunities, both indirect and direct, and particularly creating new machinery focused things like apprentice opportunities, I think is really key for this. We ultimately want to increase the commercialization of new British built machines, but also facilitate that better collaboration between business and research institutes moving forward. So I'm going to pause there, and I want to, we've set the scene now and introduced the concept and the ambition for why the Advanced Machinery and Productivity Institute was set up. And I want to ask you, of all of these things we've heard, what most directly affects your business? What makes a difference to you on a day-to-day basis? I'll just give a couple of a minute or so for that poll to be answered.
That's really super. People are starting to respond into that poll. So what most directly affects your business, ranking the 6 items on the slide in order. So we'd like a few more responses. You know, this is helping build the evidence base for, you know, future funding into machinery, understanding the biggest challenges that you have to overcome, so that the proposals that will be shaped and written going into government agencies, etc., truly reflect what you're thinking. Give it another couple of minutes, Dan. I think, it's a sort of just people want to just think about it a little bit and then respond. And we also can't see who's respond. So your response is anonymous. There's not going to be any, company X said and company Y said. These are all completely anonymous. So, please be open and responsive. Those of you who follow me or see me online, I'm always banging on about, surveys and proposals are only ever as good as the feedback that we get in them. So it'd be good to have some good solid response to these polls. They're just keeping drifting in for a little bit, Dan, so we'll just stick with it for another minute or so.
Great.
I'm pleased to advise we've also got Aaron back online. Poor Aaron, sitting there minding his own business, and the construction workers have just gone through all the BT lines outside. So he's found another route in, and we'll come back to Aaron when we've finished with Dan's presentations. Okay. So I think we're holding for now about 18 responses, Dan. So do you want to pick up again?
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Ruth. Great. So AMPI was a wonderful ambition, but in order to make it a reality, we needed some funding. So AMPI exists today thanks to £22.6 million from UK Research and Innovation Strength in Places Fund. This was a fund that was designed to help areas of the UK build on existing regional strengths in research and innovation to deliver benefits to that UK economy, but ultimately extrapolated out to the UK as a whole. So this funding was used to launch a programme in Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire to directly support UK manufacturing companies, but while also learning what a sustainable future programme and future institute will look like. The programme is led by the National Physical Laboratory in collaboration with 15 other partners across industry, academia and local government. And it's delivering on a number of initiatives across the programme. First and foremost, the programme provides funding to allow both business-led innovation, but also collaboration with research and with innovation. The funding also allows partners to access machinery expertise and facilities from across our research network that may have been out of reach previously, simply because you don't know what you don't know, or because of costs or whatever it might be. So we enable that access. And finally, we have a huge portfolio of innovation projects that are going to deliver real benefits for the sector. And you'll hear an example of one of those projects from Aaron later. These are both industry-led machinery development projects, so higher on the technology readiness level, but also groundbreaking academic research. And it's through a combination of initiatives that AMPI is driving innovation within machinery manufacturing through access to this expertise and this collaboration and this funding. Our belief is that this will lead to more commercialized machinery products, generating sort of growth from local sales, but also from exports too, and to create skilled jobs. AMPI is the first of its kind in the sector, but it draws upon lessons from established and successful programs such as Made Smarter, which supports UK manufacturers adopting digital tech, but also the EPSRC Future Manufacturing Hubs, which sort of bring together academic researchers to commercialise early stage research in emerging areas. The engagement and interest in being involved in the AMPI programme has just been incredible. And we really want to support as many companies as possible throughout this 5 years. So the consortium began with 10 of us, 4 SMEs, working with universities, research institutes and local government. That consortium has now grown to 16 with the recent introduction of 6 new SMEs who are all leading advanced machinery development projects in their own right. But we've also been able to support many more through a variety of funding mechanisms that allow AMPI funding to have as wide a reach and make as big an impact as possible throughout the sector and the region. In fact, our Innovation for Machinery scheme, which is going to be relaunched later this morning, has demonstrated that there's a huge demand for simplified, flexible industry support schemes, and is already seeing further demand, both from inside our defined region, but also from wider in the UK, which are really good lessons and really good signs for the future. Now, AMPI aims to not just support, but also to act as a leader and a voice for the machinery community. And in consultation with the community I've just shown you, but also many more companies within the UK, we came together to develop the UK's first advanced machinery technology roadmap. The roadmap is our first attempt at defining these industry challenges and the emerging technologies that will hopefully solve those challenges. It acts as a reference point for us to align our research portfolio and ultimately shape the development of a future institute. Now, of course, a roadmap, as with the polls that are coming up on your screen, they're a great indicator of where we are at a given time. But for it to really be useful, it needs to be a live document, refined over time to ensure it meets the needs of UK industry, which are ever changing. You can have a look at the roadmap on our website in all its glory. And there's also a short form next to it to record feedback, which helps us to continue to develop that map over time and make sure that it continues to be relevant. So we're 2.5 years into the programme now, with 2 years left to run. And we're starting to see some really tangible outputs. So I just wanted to give you a few numbers to bring this to life. So to date, we've engaged with more than 250 businesses across Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. And that number goes up if you include the businesses we've begun to engage with outside of that region. This has led to more than 50 formal collaborations being formed, and in turn, leading to us commissioning more than 50 machinery research projects that span just a huge number of cross-cutting sectors and technologies across machinery, robotics, automation, and the supporting technologies within there. Within these projects, there's more than 30 companies now have benefited from funding, and that results in just about £8 million so far going specifically to SMEs for SME industry-led projects. In turn, this has supported the creation of more than 30 jobs across industry and academia, and the number of people working on the AMPI programme actually directly has trebled in the 2 years that I've been working on it. And finally, we've created the roadmap, the technology roadmap that you've just seen. And these numbers have far out exceeded the KPIs we set ourselves back in 2021, and just continue to grow and grow and grow. And the funding that we're going to launch later on this morning is designed to just keep building on that success and learning from the feedback we're getting. So on that note, all of this has given us incredible amounts of insight into what works for industry and what doesn't work for industry, and what works for the companies in our sector. This particular AMPI programme is a pilot, and naturally in a pilot, not everything we do will work. But being able to offer a wide range of funding and support and innovation initiatives has allowed the core AMPI model to be refined based on the feedback the community has given us. And it's actually that feedback that makes us more determined than ever to deliver this enduring institute for the machinery community that brings us all together today. In fact, during an event held in 2023 by the mayors of Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire, Andy Burnham and Tracy Brabin, where they outlined a vision for sort of revitalising the North's industrial landscape, AMPI was credited as one of the catalysts for high quality advanced manufacturing innovation. And it's great to hear the support from local and national government, as that is going to be crucial going forward. Good. So that brings us to our second poll. So moving on from the challenges, what I've described is an innovation programme that has tried to offer a number of different support mechanisms, funding and initiatives to be able to drive machinery development and to drive us forward. So I'm interested from the wider community today of everything we've described from the pilot, what would be of most use to you and what really resonates with you the most. And if you could rank those from most resonates to least resonates, that would give us really good insight into what works for you, and crucially what you'd like to see more of as we move on to designing a future institute.
That's really good, Dan. Thank you. So yet again, here we are. We've got a poll. And I think this one is almost more important if we shape AMPI going forwards, as to it could do any one of these 5 things, but what are the most important things for you? And the thing I've really found out about machinery, and I know you guys are all the machinery experts, is actually access to other experts has been really important to you, or just being able to connect a bit better has been really important. But the big overarching thing is that you are a network of smaller companies, medium-sized companies, and so actually the sort of one size fits all that the larger organisations tend to work to might not be pertinent to you. So this particular poll is really important as we shape AMPI to deliver mechanisms that work for you, the machinery community, to enable you to grow your businesses here in the UK. So, you know, let's keep those polls coming. We've got 19 in the first one. Let's see if we can get to 25 in the second one. Going to give you another couple of minutes. You know, just as again, it's completely anonymous, and you know, your insights are really, really critical. Just a couple, just one more minute, Dan, and then we'll just see if we can get that over at least to the same number as the first one, but maybe a few extra ones as well. We've got people au fait with the technology. Come on, team.
We're aware that there's a couple of people who can't use the poll. So what we'll do is we'll put the questions in the Q&A, and if they can then respond their answers, it's the only way we can get your answers, but unfortunately they won't be anonymous. So if you're happy to do that, I can put them in the Q&A section for you to write your responses.
And then you'll put them in the poll.
I'll sort that out.
In the Q&A.
Brilliant.
In the Q&A.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you. Is that Georgina?
It was Paris, but yeah, that's fine.
Paris, sorry, Paris. That's great. Thank you very much. Really helpful. All right, then, Dan, let's roll with that. We've got 21. And if we get a few extra via Paris and popping back in, Paris won't share who said what, I'm sure. We'll go with that. All right,
wonderful.
Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, everybody. So, why is this important? Well, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology have set out their priorities to put the UK at the top of the table where science and technology is concerned. Crucially, this includes developing and deploying new and existing technologies. Let's relate this to machinery for a second. There are 2 main approaches to advanced machinery. There's those that are using and adopting or deploying advanced machinery to improve a process, and there's those that are designing, developing and building advanced machinery. The first is well supported. AMPI is proposing to address the second. There are a number of initiatives, programs and centres doing a brilliant job addressing the need to increase the adoption and deployment of new technologies. Centres such as the High Value Manufacturing Catapult and programs such as Made Smarter are incredibly well equipped with expertise and support mechanisms to de-risk the adoption of technology for businesses. Some of these centres are unrivaled within the world and are just doing an incredible job with incredible expertise. The Advanced Machinery Institute is addressing the second challenge to increase the volume of UK designed, developed and commercialised machinery technologies, joining up that develop, deploy value chain for the benefit of the whole manufacturing supply chain, and in turn driving growth in UK manufacturing as a whole. You know, wouldn't it be great if we could contribute to manufacturing companies all over the country making a choice to purchase and adopt UK-built machinery? Yes, because it's better, but also because it's readily available and abundant. Across the UK, there is a predominant focus on the procurement of existing overseas technologies and little on the development and exploitation of homegrown manufacturing technologies. At a time of major disruption from increasingly sophisticated technologies, and in contrast to our sort of global competitors, there is no UK Research and Innovation Institute specifically designed for the needs of the UK advanced machinery sector. So, through the learnings from our pilots and the consultations with industry to date, this is what we understand industry needs. Today, I'm proposing the creation of a new enduring Advanced Machinery Institute. The Institute will be an industry-defined response to the challenges you've heard today. So through partnerships with a wider UK innovation network, it will drive innovation within machinery manufacturing, leading to more commercialized advanced machinery products, developing growth in that sector and increasing technology supply chain resilience and creating higher skilled jobs. We're really working to demonstrate a framework where investment in machinery innovation leads to commercial success. Many SMEs possess the ambition and the capability to innovate and lead the way if provided with the right support, collaborations and funding mechanisms. And whilst we will seek public intervention to realise this ambition, and the need for R&D investment is crystal clear, government contribution to R&D is evidently constrained. However, it's not simply a case of just increasing R&D spend, but rather focusing that spend on the right areas and through the right frameworks, removing the barriers to R&D funding and giving SMEs the tools they need to innovate and to bring new products to market themselves. And because machinery is such a core element of all manufacturing industries, these new machinery technologies will have such a wider impact on manufacturing sectors in the future. So what does that look like in reality? Well, the Institute will primarily support companies who are designing, developing and building advanced machinery. Though in doing so, we'll deliver benefits to the wider manufacturing industry. The focus will be on 3 areas of added value. The first, to provide mechanisms for SMEs to access existing and new machinery capability, connecting researchers and service providers to the companies who need them most, whilst in turn supporting those businesses to grow. A small company might not have experts across robotics, software control, digital design, etc., sitting there for when they might need them. But from time to time, they do need these things to innovate on a project by project or product by product basis, and their absence then becomes a roadblock. These capabilities, technologies and experts are all available through the UK's existing network. They just need to be connected to the companies who need them most. The second is to support access to innovation funding, specifically for advanced machinery development. Many small companies are focused on delivery, might not be aware of funding options available, how to apply, or they just might not be suitable in general. Equally, government funding isn't always targeted effectively because those allocating it don't know what they don't know. Facilitating a two-way conversation between industry and government to manage that funding distribution in a more appropriate manner will be something that AMPI will be able to sit at the forefront of to facilitate these projects all the way through from ideation to exploitation and maximize the value from that funding. And finally, is the development of a joined-up ecosystem, a community focused on advanced machinery innovation. UK machine manufacturers don't have the forums to regularly engage with their potential customers or partners or the research network. That means they're not getting the insight into what the market might need or what partners can offer, and it might lead to a disjointed supply chain. So the Institute will facilitate these conversations to help direct innovation in the most productive places. Being at the centre of this will also enable us to act as a thought leader for the sector, developing machinery strategies and roadmaps to guide the future of investment and bring that community together through partnerships and through events. The bringing together of non-competitive overlapping knowledge, of which there's just so much, can speed up solving these problems. There's a program in Dortmund in Germany that brings together disparate engineers in sort of a hackathon style event to identify machinery problems and solutions. And it's been the catalyst for so many high value products, in Germany. And that's why we need a collaborative organization such as an organization that can support on these areas, would de-risk innovation for small and medium-sized businesses and give them the confidence to turn ideas into commercial products. So I could sit here and say that we need funding for millions of pounds worth of infrastructure, buying a machine from every single company in the world. However, I don't believe that that's what we're being told the need is. The UK has a vast, established, incredible innovation network, as I've said many times. What we want to do is provide access to this distributed capability and partner with these organizations to overcome the barriers for the machinery industry. We'll do that firstly by designing programs and administering funding that complement existing initiatives to make sure AMPI fills niche that it is being driven and defined to fill. We'll then use these mechanisms to increase access by machinery SMEs to the wide range of capability. We're not seeking to replicate any of this capability, but simply direct and support in a way that opens the doors to machinery developers to access it. And doing this will then combine all of those forces to deliver regional and national impact for government, for our funding bodies, and for the regions and sectors that need it most, all while providing the foresight, leadership and direction for the UK machinery community. So industry has set the need, an institute to enable invention, innovation and increase adoption in new machinery and robotics through UK equipment manufacturers. The institute will enable that economic growth through the design and development and manufacture of intelligent machinery that's demanded by existing but very importantly emerging industrial sectors. In the longer term, the institute will stimulate and support the growth of that sector as it transitions to sort of more sophisticated, automated and autonomous machinery and robotic systems. We expect to grow the UK advanced machinery capability to a 2 billion export capacity within 10 years, whilst establishing many high-value manufacturing sector jobs. Within the first 3 years of operation, we'll aim to deliver an increased number of machinery products out of these UK SMEs, but also out of universities and new business ventures. To deliver an increased UK machinery deployment into national and regional manufacturing programmes, I'd like to, we want to see UK-built machinery across all of these centres and universities that already exists, and increase that adoption across the supply chain. We want to see employment growth across machinery businesses, but also and critically across their wider supply chains. And the development of a UK machinery strategy that facilitates a pipeline of skills and knowledge, further increasing the support available through collaboration and funding. Doing this will not just benefit machinery manufacturers and their customers, but also innovators, researchers, developers, the wider supply chain, and also the UK economy. So to conclude, what are we going to do over the next 12 months and what should you look out for? Well, we're going to start by developing and refining a business case that details the need for sustained investment in the sector. That's on me. We're going to seek industry support to validate that case and to forge partnerships that demonstrate the real world need. That's on you and the industry. Your feedback, your support and your guidance is critical in shaping the direction of this institute. And finally, we'll seek long-term investment to the tune of £100 million over 10 years, primarily from government, but again, backed up by industry support. The funding will realise the institute, but build on experience and successes being demonstrated through the Strength in Places Fund Innovation Programme to deliver all of these benefits that we've seen today. It will also be a catalyst for industry, generating confidence in the vibrant and innovative but under-supported UK advanced machinery sector to invest in itself and increase business-driven investment. So, what to look out for? So later this year, we'll be publishing a progress report showcasing the game-changing work going on with the current innovation programme. And then early in 2025, I will release a white paper detailing the need for an advanced machinery institute based on consultations such as this one and further consultations to come. Towards the middle of 2025, we'll be holding the very first AMPI International Conference and Exhibition, which I'm very excited about. And finally, a year from now is our target to having secured long-term investment for the Advanced Machinery Institute. The current innovation programme runs out in less than 2 years, so the time to act is now. Interspersed with this will be a number of articles and case studies demonstrating the impact an intervention such as this can have on the machinery sector, the wider manufacturing industry and UK PLC as a whole. As we seek public funding based on validation and further industry consultation, we value your continued support and your feedback beyond the end of this workshop to strengthen that case for investment and make a real difference to the sector that we are clearly also so passionate about. Good. Well, thank you very much for your time and for listening to me today. I'm going to finish my section of this morning with a final poll and then a bit of an open question. So we're firstly going to ask you on a scale of 1 to, very simply on a scale of 1 to 4, of everything I've just said of what a machinery institute could and will look like, how well does that meet your needs as a machinery business, as a researcher, as an institution, and as an engineer in lots of cases? And then finally, we'll move on to an open question to ask you, what resonates with you the most? What feedback do you have? What's really, really important to you? And that'll be an open text question.
So for the free text question, everyone will need to go to the Q&A to answer.
Thank you, Dan. That's really super. So how well does this proposal meet your needs on a scale of 1 to 4? That's just, pop a number in, 1 being not really, all the way through to 4, nailed it. And again, if you've got key things that you want to say from the market insight, plans for the future, what resonates, a free text question, stick that into the Q&A comments for consolidation a little bit later. But Dan, that was really super. And, AMPI has done and continues to do very good things with the machinery community in mind. And Dan's given us an insight. There's a roadmap that helps steer investment. The other tool that roadmap does is when governments start talking to sectors about investment and innovation, they always want to know whether you've got a plan. They always want to know if you know what needs to be done. And the technology roadmap is a really critical cornerstone, really, of that conversation. So you can talk to government and investors and policymakers and say, we have a technology roadmap. We know the direction of travel we're taking this community. And then the mechanisms about that diversity of connection, networks, conferencing, investment, access to expertise. And I think the overarching thing for me is that AMPI creates you a voice. So you are not constantly asking other trade bodies or other research institutes to talk for you. AMPI will talk for you. It will sit on panels at conferences for the machine community. It would seek membership of things like the MTA so that it can give you your voice in the right places as a collective. So really super, Dan. Really good overview. So Aaron, we have you back online. We're going to go slightly back in time.
Ever so quickly before we jump back into Aaron, there's just one question based on Dan's section just then, and also one thing we just wanted to clarify in the Q&A. So I'll just quickly talk about the second poll that we went into, where we were ranking important things from what Dan had described in the pilot. What would be the most important? Someone in the Q&A just added that they'd like access to universities for collaboration. We'd just like to clarify that when we talk about collaboration with research institutes, that is also covered in this. So thank you for that question. We'd also just like to put another question to Dan. Is funding specific to innovation, research and development, or does it branch out to education which can progress research and development, feasibility analysis work?
Thanks, Georgina. Yeah, that's a great question. The answer, annoyingly, is that it depends on the fund and the source of the funding. But what we want to do within AMPI is we want to be able to offer funding right across the board. So for groundbreaking research and development projects, for higher TRL machinery development and exploitation projects, but also for the training and the skills development and the content development for skills that is required across the board. You'll see later on today, as we relaunch our Innovation for Machinery scheme, that there is a nod towards training and skills in there as well. And we recognise that as a critical area and that companies need support within there. There's two parts to that, though. One is funding and helping companies to pay for and to upskill. But there's also further down the chain is making sure that the courses and the content are available and that are suitable for that. So we're trying to do work at both ends of the scale.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. And then just one more comment we had, sort of a comment question. I would like to see more promotion of UK machinery manufacturers. I often say we are the best kept secret. In addition to this, maybe we could lobby our government to help companies buy British with tax breaks or other incentives, etc.
I think that's a really fabulous point. And I think, again, for me, having, you know, worked on the periphery of AMPI really over the last couple of years, AMPI offers you that route. That sort of, you know, Dan as the Institute Director could now offer that voice into some of those government stakeholders. It could collate the evidence required to be able to support that kind of direction imperative, tax breaks, etc. There's lines of lobbying where the Institute would have to be careful, because when you're part funded by government, you can't go rant at them quite the same. But you can certainly provide them with the evidence of the opportunity and some of the solutions that could fix it. And again, I think, you know, Dan, on the skills part, you know, supporting access to the apprenticeship programs that are readily available, highlighting, you know, the university courses and where they are and what they are, you know, even that would be, you know, a big helping hand to the machinery network. But I think the voice of AMPI can really address some of those points.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why we want a dedicated institute to be that, I suppose, voice and that leader in the sector. We've done a little bit of work with other organisations, and I won't name names, who have tried to promote a made in Britain or a reshoring type agenda. And I've been, to be honest with you, very, very disappointed about how that's worked, and to see a room full of actually foreign machine builders in there with a banner that says "Made in Britain," and that kind of makes me want to dig my heels in and push even harder for this to be a big part of what AMPI does for the sector.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Georgina, can we go back to Aaron now?
Yes, thank you. That's all the questions so far, so we'll go back to Aaron.
That's
Paris
great.
is just going to move the slides.
Welcome back, Aaron. We've gone back to your slides. Good to have you back online, and we're going to hand straight over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry about that. At least we've got good infrastructure in the UK to support all these machines we need to build. Stuff like keeping the power on. Okay, cool. So I think we've pretty much covered this slide. If we move on to the next one, please. Yeah, so I guess this is just my point of view from where things are in the industry, and kind of how I see it from running multiple SMEs, one in a manufacturing business and another one producing machines. It looks a lot, and I've seen a lot of peers who've come up with fantastic ideas, and there's a bit of a culture in the UK for us looking to perhaps maximise personal wealth over long-term, bigger incentivized projects. So, you know, we're very, very good at the early development. We're fantastic. The academic scene gets a huge amount of traction, a huge amount of funding, and develops lots of fantastic ideas, but we don't keep a hold of those ideas very well compared to other countries. It feels like a bit of a cultural thing. So I think, you know, in Germany and Japan and other places, engineering and manufacturing's held in higher esteem, I think, than perhaps in the UK, especially through the school system, where, you know, apprenticeships are not seen as valuable perhaps as further education and these kind of things. And that also fuels the problems that we have with skills gaps. So the majority of staff I employ come through apprenticeship schemes, and we can't rely on the FE providers at the minute. So there's a lot of work that you know, is being done, I think, but you know, some of these suggestions have been batting around for decades and still haven't made their way to being executed to the benefit of businesses. So, you know, it needs a coat of looking at, and perhaps AMPI is a really good vehicle to be able to put additional pressure on these providers and the combined authorities and the government to be able to kind of commit to delivering some of these things that are talked about a lot. I also think that we're quite reserved in collaboration between businesses. So I think it feels like we're quite good at academic collaboration, but we're nervous and apprehensive at dealing with businesses that we think may be competitors. Dan touched on this point. There's a whole heap of knowledge that is probably not going to give anybody a competitive advantage over you because they're in a different market or a different application. And if we were able to trade that knowledge more effectively, I think it would be to mutual benefit of everyone. But yeah, and you know, principally, I think as a nation we are too academic, really. I think, you know, we focus a lot on publications. When they're entered in the public domain as well, then they're open to be commercialized by pretty much anyone. I think better mechanisms are needed to be able to give those and offer those opportunities up for new pieces of technology and ideas to local or UK-based businesses before it gets kind of published on a global platform where we can get beaten on, you know, labour, I guess, incubating that technology. Next slide, please. So we've had some fantastic support from AMPI, mix of stuff. We've got some project run-ins, but we had 2 really good I4Ms. The one in question here we did with Rakesh from the University of Manchester, Huddersfield, sorry. And it was a focus on computational fluid dynamics for a project we were delivering for a really large OEM. The output of that has led to, I think there's 3 or 4 pieces of intellectual property that's heading towards patent that we're just developing. We also had a successful KTP associate through Rakesh's team and the University of Huddersfield, who's working for us now and is, you know, spitting out some absolutely cracking work. The I4M process as well, compared to a lot of grant funding, was quite accessible. It was a quick process to get going. The report that we got out of it for the money was very good. I mean, we've had collaborative smart grants of, you know, £500,000, and the outputs from some of the partners in that have been a lot leaner than what we had from that project. So it was all around a really good success, to be fair. In general as well, on the other projects that we've done through AMPI, they've been great in kind of business to business collaboration and collaboration with universities. And they've led on to other opportunities as well for us. So that was good. Next slide, please. Cool. So I guess at the minute, one of the main things on my radar and a lot of the stuff that I'm talking to people about is how are industries that are perhaps not, the markets are not great in the UK, going to do and trade with some of the changes that are expected. So, you know, I'm banking on some of the budget stuff being increasing taxes to fund the holes that they have. That will change the way that we need to trade, I think. So there is potential for businesses that are at a stage of good profitability to be looking to reinvest some of their revenues to reduce their profits for a long-term benefit. So perhaps they could look into position some of that money towards skills so that they can improve productivity later down the road. There is also a big move for SEIS and EIS investment. So with the increase in tax and also some tightening around people being able to make investments in pension funds, it's likely from the people that I've heard in the market that there is going to be a big uptake in trying to offset tax through those schemes. That could be a good advantage for businesses and startups looking to produce machinery in the UK. And I think that I knew nothing about these schemes when I first started Holton. And if I'd have known more about them, I'd have been able to position better, I think. So there's a piece on education there that we can do to businesses that I think will put entrepreneurs and other startups in a better standing to go forward. I think we need to think a lot about skills. The gap is getting worse. There's a lot of talk about it, but you haven't been around long enough to know whether there's been talk about it since forever. And actually, that's just how it always is, and it never converts into action. But you know, since COVID, there's been a lot of skilled staff taking early retirement, and that skill's been lost. And I've been, you know, looking at how can we recover some of those retirees, bring them back into the marketplace to maybe mentor young people, so we can kind of circulate that knowledge back around so it's not just completely offline. I think that all of these kind of things, and there'll be tons of other ideas from people in the consortium, not just myself, but AMPI is a really good vehicle to be able to kind of make these things happen. I'm at the coalface, I guess, to some extent. I understand the problems and I've got some solutions, not all of them, but I don't have the time and resources to be able to actually deliver those things. So yeah, I think that's something that would be really good for AMPI to deliver. And that's everything from me.
Thank you very much, Aaron. That was really super, and really great to hear, both the sort of large company perspective on the sort of macro view, but then what it's really like on the ground in terms of, do you know that you can get government support? Do you know that actually, there are mechanisms to support you, how to get to some of these other organisations? And I really, really loved the idea of mentoring from, networks of those who are retiring or, stepping away. I think there's a sort of win-win for lots of people in that kind of construct of being able to impart your experience and knowledge into some safe hands, whilst also growing your business better through the knowledge of those personnel. So that's really super. So we have heard from the Prime, from BAE, we've heard from Holson, from Aaron, we've heard from Dan about the pilot and the proposal. And we are now going to hear from, I believe we're now going to hear from Gareth Edwards, who is going to talk about the next phase of the Innovation for Machinery competition. And over to you, Gareth.
Many thanks, Ruth, and many thanks to all of our speakers. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gareth Edwards. I've been with the AMPI concept for many years, and it's just such a joy, a genuine joy, to see the success and positive impact that this scheme is being able to make. And I'm really, really grateful for everybody being here today to help us continue on that journey. So you'll have heard the difference that AMPI is trying to make, that its mission to support UK machinery innovators is only going to be delivered if we do different things and do things differently. And that was very much the intention behind the Innovation for Machinery scheme, responding to the needs of the UK's advanced machinery community to enable machinery innovators and developers and technology developers to overcome hurdles that are holding them back from making those real breakthrough moments and really getting to that next generation of advanced machinery. The Innovation for Machinery scheme is a deliberate attempt to make innovation support available. Make it available to industry in a way that they can benefit without the burdens that come with other schemes. So we're really, really pleased to be able to move this program forward. We've been trying a number of different models, a number of different levels of funding and routes of funding. We've really learned some really positive feedback. So I'm really comfortable that this next round of funding is going to really hit the spot. For some clarity around the terms, now bearing in mind that this funding is being made available through UKRI, through its Strength in Places fund, so there are some boundaries that we have to put around this, but the lessons that we're learning from this scheme are really going to be applied for the national scheme as we develop that moving forward. So I4M provides SME businesses in particular in Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire with access to advanced machinery expertise, and it's really designed to break that boundary, as I say, to develop the next generation of machinery and really try and secure and create the next level of jobs and growth within the sector. So those are the measures. That's what we're trying to achieve there. We are looking, we'll come on to some of the detail next about what we're trying to encourage development in. For clarity, we are managing, the National Physical Laboratory is managing the fund on behalf of AMPI, and the funding, as I said earlier, is coming through UKRI's Strength in Places fund. Next slide, please. The scope is pretty clear. It's very much about developing of new machinery technology for manufacturing within advanced machinery, robotics, automation, and those associated industries. So we're really looking for projects that are going to demonstrate real progress and clear market opportunities. So this is very much a pull. Technology pull, and you can see in the globes on the right hand side there the focus areas for the research that we're trying to or the innovation rather that we're trying to support there. So your projects should be able to demonstrate that they are developing new and novel technology, either for current processes and products or future products. We will need to develop best practice and case studies to be able to demonstrate and talk about the successes that this funding is being able to bring to companies. The projects should be able to articulate how they are going to demonstrate improvement in business productivity and ideally competitiveness and overcoming those hurdles, and enhance capability within the broader advanced machinery industry. So we're going to be able to really signal to the wider community that look, get involved, getting involved in these sorts of technologies, and we'll be able to push the boundaries of what we're doing. Next slide, please. We're quite specific about what the scope is. What it really should be on the left-hand side there, the industries around, if you are working with a machine tool manufacturer, robotics, other more complex machines, if you like, or other sector machines, control systems, digitalization, subsystems that go into wider machinery, and of course automation systems for a manufacturing domain are really in scope. Could also include, as the list on the right hand side there, some really detailed subsystem components and processes within that. So just give you a chance to read through those. So that's the scope that we're looking to support. And obviously these slides and this brief will be available later. And next slide, please. And taking feedback and learning lessons from how we've been delivering this scheme in the past, we're splitting it into two. So we're trying yet another thing here, and we're really hopeful that this is going to really resonate with the SME community in particular. So stream one. This is very much what we've been doing already. So this is providing access to machinery expertise. So that's at no cost to the business other than their own costs. So so your own labour, your own time, your own materials, travel and subsistence and so on. So that's on you. But access to the expertise, the facilities and the people comes at no cost. And that can be accessed through the National Physical Laboratory or any university based in Greater Manchester or West Yorkshire. So those of you familiar with previous schemes will have seen it linked to the 4 founding universities. They are still very much in scope, and we're looking forward to continuing to work with them. But we're also opening it up to some of the other universities across Greater Manchester or West Yorkshire. We have funding of up to £50,000 in project costs, and that will go to that expertise or that capability provider, so NPL or the universities. And the project must have at least one university or National Physical Laboratory and be based in Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. It can be as complex as you want to make it, but I would argue that a simpler director consortium is better, and a one-to-one relationship is fine. Now, really excited by stream 2 as well, where we're looking to support businesses through sort of more of a consultancy support. So that's where companies are have a real need, but are struggling to afford or struggling to find access to consultancy support, services to help with machinery innovation, or even training. So we're clear the context is very much around supporting the development of an advanced machinery system or machine itself. But what we're looking here is that we will provide funding of up to £10,000, providing you match that 10,000 or that up to £10,000 and can demonstrate that you're doing that. So we will provide funding of up to £10,000 on a 50% match basis for you as an organisation to be able to access consultancy services or training that you are struggling to find or to afford elsewhere. So we're clear the funding is for purchase services only. We're deliberately excluding materials, equipment, travel and subsistence because, you know, that really is business as usual. So it's really looking for access to capability that is really going to transform your machinery development and innovation project. The nuance here, of course, is that those services can be sourced from anywhere in the UK. The caveat being, of course, you need to be within region and the impact needs to be delivered within region. But if the best service provider is found from elsewhere in the UK, then you can go and access the support, and we will be able to support you financially in doing that. Slide, please. We've mentioned a couple of times about the benefit, but the boundaries that the Strength in Places Fund puts on the eligibility for funding. So for clarity, we are targeting this at small to medium enterprises in Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. And that, of course, is defined by the postcodes and by the political boundaries. So SMEs in Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire are eligible for funding. And as I said earlier, the project work must be carried out in this region. And if you're not sure about whether you're in or out, please let us know and we can give you clarity on that. Very clear, projects must exploit results from the UK or in the UK. So if you're going to create export capability, that's fine, but we really need the exploitation to be coming from inside the UK. We really need projects to be starting within 3 months from approval, so we allow time for discussion and refining and forming, but we really need those projects to start. So you can't come up with an idea and then say, well, we'll get back to it in 9 months, because we want to make sure that the most people are getting access to this funding as possible. Each project is expected to last between 3 to 6 months, so that gives you a feel for the pace of what we're looking to deliver here. And because of our constraints, we have to be finishing work by June 2026. The lead organisation must be a UK registered SME and GM, SME, either within Greater Manchester or West Yorkshire. And a business can only lead, but can participate in more, but can only lead in one application. Universities, of course, can collaborate on all sorts. So we're really trying to make sure that businesses are getting access to the best support possible. By all means, you can bring in partners from anywhere, ideally across the UK. It's just that the constraints on funding are geographic. So please do feel that if there's a great organisation that you want to work with the other side of the country, of course they can participate. They just can't receive funding directly. And then a caveat, because we're trying to maximise the impact that we have with our currently available funding, we're proposing that the condition is rather that anybody who has already received AMPI funding, including previous rounds of Innovation for Machinery, are only eligible for the second stream of funding. Next slide. So for clarity, and I won't read through all of these, but you can get a sense that the reverse of our conditions is obviously out of scope. For clarity, we're not prepared to support capital expenditure or infrastructure projects. This is very much a project to help break the boundaries and get over a hurdle of an innovation challenge that is going to lead to next generation and advanced machinery development. Next slide, please. So just to give some clarity around how this works. So we've really worked hard to make, as Aaron very kindly pointed out, a very simple application process that makes it accessible and removes as much of the administrative burden, so you really get the most benefit out of the innovation support. So, however, there is, to be completely fair and transparent, to all. This is public funding that we're investing here. This is an assessed programme. The budget is defined, and therefore we cannot guarantee that everybody who applies will get funding. And there will be a competent assessment panel, triage panel, that will assess each application and make judgment calls. We expect it to be, look, if the perfect application comes through and it's completely within scope, fine, crack on. We will come back and challenge and support if there's a good idea, but it needs more work. So be prepared for that. We will only accept applications made through the Innovation for Machinery portal that we will have created on the ampuk.org website. So full scope and eligibility criteria will be made available on that website. So please do read that before applying to make sure we're making positive progress. And yeah, if you need support in developing the project, submitting the application or finding collaboration partners, please do reach out. We do have a team of people available that can help us with that and make sure we find you people to make that contact. The scheme is launching today, so really pleased that we've been able to work in the background to, as I say, to learn the lessons of what's most effective for people and really apply those. Hence the two strands that we've got going. Applications will be available in November, so the portal will open for applications for November, and then it will close on the 31st of October, or, and I expect this to be true, that when the funding is fully utilised before then. So November to 31st of October. I'm really excited to see what ideas come through. Next slide, I think that's us. So hopefully the QR code, if you want to use your phone to access it immediately. We'll be making sure it's coming out on the social media channels. And remember, the website there is at the bottom. So do follow that link.
There is an opportunity to reach into the Q&A session and ask Gareth or Dan, for that matter, questions that you might have. So specific questions on I4M to Gareth, the machinations of the call, so to speak, and then Dan on AMPI. So is there anybody who's wanting to come in with some questions or open remarks? I've noted a couple of comments.
They will of course have to come through the Q&A. Yeah,
they've got to come. You've got to type it in the Q&A piece. But I've had some good comments in there from colleagues about the value of the initiative of AMPI, so needed in the UK, requiring huge support and time, but really mission critical. That connectivity into other collaborations for companies. I've read this so many times across so many different networks. If I could just reach in and say, I want to talk to 2-3 people who are in my peers in a non-competitive, open way, just to bounce ideas. This is one of the big things. I ran the Aerospace and Defence KTN a long time ago, and that is the one thing that we always did at events, bespoke one-to-one meetings with primes and supply chain companies, and it was always heavily subscribed. So am I seeing any Q&A popping up? Is anybody popping a question in? Anybody wanting to clarify anything else at this stage?
So we've just had a question.
Okay.
Will there be the opportunity to work with AMPI to refine my application if it's not right first off? What would that look like?
Great question. Gareth or Dan? Dan, I think, really, Mr. Institute Director.
Yes, absolutely. So what we are saying is officially that each application can be resubmitted one further time. The benefit of the flexible nature of how we've taken on board lessons and designed I4M is that if the project isn't suitable first time, rather than being sent back with blind feedback, we have a team that can work with you personally to address any issues and make sure, if there is an innovative and in-scope project in there, that we get it down on paper and we get the project funded.
Okay, so that's quite an important question actually, Dan, because I know that in the Aerospace Technology Institute, the institute will help develop the idea, maybe expand the consortia if they need some extra expertise. But once that bid has been submitted into stage 1, ATI don't deal with the consortia anymore. Is that going to be comparable here?
No, so that's where we differ slightly, is that there's 3 ways through the independent assessment process that Gareth mentioned. The first one is the project, great, crack on. One of them is that there is no, the project is out of scope. and therefore won't be funded. But the middle one is that we think there's a good idea in there, but that the argument perhaps hasn't been made properly. And we have that's where we have an industrial engagement team that can work with the companies to make sure that these projects are funded should they be there. One of the issues with the existing innovation funding network is that it almost takes a degree in innovation funding sometimes to be able to submit an application to be successful. And there's really loads of nuances around that. We want to try and overcome those challenges because SMEs and machinery SMEs have fed back and said, A, we don't know how to do it with the uber competitive nature of innovation funding, but B, we don't necessarily have time to sit and learn how to do that. That isn't a day job. So we want to try and remove those barriers as best as possible.
That's super. Thanks, Dan. Are there any other questions coming through, Paris or Georgina?
Yes, we've had a few.
Great.
So going back to the first question, would be interested to hear more at some stage about how the skills shortage might be addressed. This is a big constraint for many MC tool manufacturers.
Dan.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something that we are finding huge gaps really in the available skills content, if you like, for a better phrase, that we'll be able to do. So we are hoping very shortly to commission a machinery sector skills analysis that will be able to identify some of those gaps so we can best direct what we do in the future. So once we launch that, you'll see that across our website, across social media, and we'll be looking for consultations of experts in the area to be able to contribute towards that.
For me, there's also, you know, the value of AMPI, and I keep coming back to being the voice of machinery, is that, you know, there are huge numbers of skills programs that get led through central government. And if AMPI really takes flight, then suddenly your skills requirements will have a direct and well articulated feed into those projects. So it could be different apprentices, more on KTPs. It could be, you know, addressing a particular part of the A-level syllabus or the apprenticeship syllabus on machinery, or it could be all sorts. But at the moment, there isn't a sort of direct channel that the skills development strategies in central government can pick up the phone and say what's going on in machinery. And again, the value of AMPI will be to corral that view and make sure you are heard in national skills development activities. And then, of course, in the regional programmes, such as those led out of Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. I know that Greater Manchester at the moment are trialling a sort of UCAS for T-skills, and suddenly, you know, the AMPI voice could be threading into those technical skills and what's needed in a region. So this cohesion around machinery via AMPI is critical in multiple dimensions. So I hope that's helpful. Georgina, Paris, did you say there's a couple of other questions?
Yes. Someone said, I love the concept of AMPI, but it's very restricted with funding due to the geographical boundaries. We are based in Derby, so unable to apply for funding. Will this expand in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, the answer, Ruth is nodding furiously. The answer is absolutely yes. So the funding at the moment is funded through the Strength in Places Fund, and that kind of does what it says on the tin. The restrictions are both a blessing and a curse because it's enabled us to develop a really strong regional cluster. But as you've articulated and answered the question, excludes other companies in the country. From my point of view, and I hope Ruth's nodding agrees with this, is that for AMPI to be a success and to be a sustainable business model, we need to expand. It needs to be a machinery institute for the UK. So whilst we have no funding guaranteed today to support companies around the country, that is job number one to be able to secure.
Yeah, I really do agree with you. I think there's some real strengths and weaknesses of these different mechanisms like ATI or the APC or even the catapults. And, you know, the thing that I've really seen over the last 2 years is there just isn't a front door situated somewhere in the UK that says machinery matters and machinery happens here. And so, you know, the construct behind AMPI is to absolutely create that. Not to create a gargantuan organisation, not to create a really burdensome overhead, but to create the relevant voice, mechanisms and tools to support you as industry in being able to double, triple, quadruple your businesses and secure, you know, good support to your business, to your employees, to your regions, and then ultimately to the overall economy in the UK. So absolutely we'll go beyond boundaries. It's just one of those, you know, strength in places funds are boundary constrained. Good and bad, mostly bothersome. I think it's been quite difficult, but that's the idea of a China 10-year, £100 million sustained fund that almost 10 million a year is going into machinery across the UK. And importantly, I think via mechanisms that work for you, that are bespoke to machinery and small to medium enterprises. Okay, Georgina, Paris, are there any other questions?
Yep. So someone has asked, will particular project themes have greater weighting in terms to I4M?
No. Simple. It's a simple answer. That the scope is for you to demonstrate why it is an advanced machinery project, why it's contributing towards the sector development, and all of the things that Gareth has articulated and will be on the scope. We won't at this point be theming the fund.
Hopefully
Thank
that's
Just
fairly
just
succinct.
clarify in the scope description, we showed in the slides, but will certainly be available online. You can see where we think the priorities are. If you think we're missing something, please do say. Please do say. We're learning all the time. You know, we've consulted extensively, and we think we know what the priorities are. But don't let that hold you back if you think we're missing something.
Okay, that's really great. Thanks, Dan and Gareth. Other questions, Georgina, Paris, anything else?
Yes. How will AMPI identify other existing organisations to collaborate with to ensure that value is added, not spend duplicated?
That old chestnut, Daniel.
Yeah, it's a good question. So as it stands, we are the Strength in Places collaboration is obviously regionally restricted. So we are developing those relationships with the universities and research institutes in the region. And crucially, and we are seeing this through more and more of our AMPI projects, is getting them to work together to jointly develop capability rather than duplicate and all of those things. And that approach will then be, I suppose, extrapolated across the UK to make sure we have those relationships with all of the centres in the UK. Look, we're not in control of all research institute budget, CapEx budget in the country. We cannot control necessarily what projects and what directions these institutes go in. But what we can do is we can influence and we can direct to what the machinery industry needs, and crucially, like Ruth said, act as a front door and try and bring those together for the good of the industry needs.
So, because the stuff that keeps coming out here is that some companies kind of get that there's this thing called Innovate UK and you can write an application and get funding. Some of you don't. So there's almost like a whole span of maturity levels of understanding. But critical to this as well is, you know, having an ecosystem or a well-mapped ecosystem of where some of the machinery work can be done. So it could get done at the MTC, it could get done at MPL, it could get done at Huddersfield, it could get done in various places. So as organisations get to grips with the notion of funded or supported innovation, the AMPI will also be able to help steer and direct. And the consequence of understanding that kind of landscape will be to understand what is happening where, and that AMPI won't support because it's already happening somewhere else. So that the government investment potentially into machinery is targeting the gaps. It's targeting the gaps in terms of how you work in innovation, you know, small soundbite pieces, you know, reactive, responsive turnaround times, and also in terms of your specifics, very, very specific challenges that you're being faced as steered and directed by your customer base. And so again, AMPI is this sort of, you know, the thread that will join all these things up for you and sit with Innovate UK, sit with them when they're doing spending reviews, sit with them when they're doing innovation calls on materials, machinery and manufacturing, and ensure that your voice is being heard into the development of those programmes. Okay, next question, please.
Looking at future projects, how are we able to source partnership/advice from AMPI fellow firms who are in different industries?
Daniel?
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Georgina?
Yep. So looking at future projects, how are we able to source partnership/advice from AMPI fellow firms who are in different industries?
Right, I see. So there's a number of ways in which we can do this currently. As Gareth mentioned, the details in the I4M launch, we have a team of people that are able to help stimulate and connect, and grow those collaborations and introduce you to companies within our community that we know of that could help join up and join those projects. But also more widely, we want to begin to run, I suppose, events and opportunities where business to business collaboration can come together and companies can start to collaborate throughout the supply chain. We can do that from a personal point of view now as our community is getting bigger. I said, we've engaged with between 250 and 300 companies now, but that's a small amount compared to what's in the sector currently. So as we move forward, we want to be able to give more opportunities for business to business collaboration.
That's super. But very specifically, if you wanted to find someone when you come off this call, if you send an email to sipf.ampy@mpl.co.uk and say, I am looking... Okay.
ampy.sipf@mpl.co.uk. I need some help with finding a collaborator, a service provider, some expertise, or anything, or just a bit of advice on a direction of a project or where you should go. Get in touch.
Get in touch. The second way you can also do it is AMPI has got a very live and kicking network on LinkedIn. It's got a great page, it's always posting, what the team are doing, where they've been, talking at conferences, networks, etc. So you can always say, I am a machinery developer looking to collaborate with another machinery developer in healthcare. Is there anyone out there? And so again, using these two tools as a kickstart whilst the events programs, the networking programs evolve is really key. And my view on this is if you don't have a go and ask, then you'll never know whether it's going to deliver your needs. So have a go. All right, Georgina, next question.
So just touching down on what you've just said, will there be face-to-face workshop/networking opportunities? Also, and I know you've already touched on this, but any particular reason this is not national? Finally, what is the view on bringing in global OEMs like DMG Mori, Makino, Mazak? Apologies for any mispronunciation there. And then the last comment on that question is really we need to be driving them to build more machines here in the UK also. I realise that's quite a few questions, so if you need me to repeat anything, that's fine.
Okay, so the first one is the reason why it isn't national is because it's part of a Strength in Places fund, and they are regionally restricted to build clusters within a given region, and that's our funding restriction at the moment. And I think I've articulated already our ambition to grow wider than that. The first point was on workshops and events. Yes, so it's something in the plans to be doing more of from 2025 onwards. I mentioned that we'll be holding our first national conference in Q2 2025, and we want to hold many more workshops, both around from a, let's call it, business perspective that we've talked about today, about how the Institute might operate and support, but also from a technology point of view to further develop the roadmap as well. So yes, look out for those throughout 2025. You're going to have to repeat the third one.
That's okay. So finally, what is the view on bringing in global OEMs, like the ones that I'm not going to butcher again? Really, we need to be driving them to build more machines here in the UK also.
Yeah, and that's part of the puzzle, isn't it? And if those companies are building machines, take Mazak for a good example, then they are making use of UK innovation and contributing jobs to the sector. We are currently restricted under where the funding comes from, and Ruth touched on it a minute ago about the restraints and the restrictions and things like that around funding, but this will be a responsibility of the Institute once it's up and running to engage with and work out how best to bring companies like that into the fold, and it's the same answer for any UK based OEM and machine builder as well. It doesn't change.
Yeah, it's all to do with, as programs maybe get a bit more complicated, a bit more expansive, then within that the criteria would be around, the benefit to the UK, the exploitation into the UK. It's certainly a core criteria in programmes involving the Advanced Propulsion Centre and the Aerospace Technology Institute. Both of those programmes have to demonstrate UK exploitation, UK employment growth, UK economic benefits. And so, you know, as programmes in AMPI evolve and get bigger, then the route to pulling them into the UK would be through the it has to be exploited in the UK, design made, etc.
If I could just build on I'll build on that point as well. One of the motivations of AMPI is, of course, to lift that whole community, to lift the manufacturing sector, recognizing how important machinery is to a healthy manufacturing-based economy. And while a lot of our narrative today has been about how do we pull industry forward, how do we push industry forward using funding and collaborative support, it's also about enabling the wider manufacturing community to say, actually, I can source from the UK, actually I have got the skilled people to be able to come into my factories and operate machinery, I have got the skilled people to come in and design products that can take advantage of novel machinery. So the narrative goes much wider, and then making the UK the most attractive place to set up your machinery manufacturing factory. Why not? I mean, that's got to be right at the heart of what we're trying to achieve as well.
Thank you. Next question.
So the final question we have, so if anyone else wants to submit any, please, this is your last chance. But the last question we have is there a route for UK end users of manufacturing machines to engage with AMPI, to access/coordinate resources of the Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire to develop a machine solution as a paid for service, end user not applying for grant or any public funding?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah, really good question. It's interesting, isn't it? So one of the things that I'm going to talk from a personal perspective here, one of the things that I would like the Advanced Machinery Institute to do is to be able to essentially run those innovation challenges, so to bring the community, bring the supply chain together to meet the demand of an end user. It's not something we can do within a grant funding program at the moment, but it's certainly on my radar in the future. And there'll be a great opportunity to run workshops, to run challenge-focused events, to be able to bring people together for nothing other to begin with than just raising awareness. Actually, there is loads of stuff and loads of companies building machines in the UK already, let alone answering that challenge and directing these companies to build those future products as well. So there's a bit of a two-pronged approach. So it is absolutely on my radar for the future, yes.
That's really super, Dan. You know, I've experienced before, you know, creating events where you have a Meet the Prime. If Ian Minton is still on the call, he will recall these from KTN days where, you know, you can apply to book a time slot, 15 minutes with the Prime or the Tier 1. And those things just were just gone in a blink of an eye. And the value really was for the SME to just get straight insight there and then of this isn't what we're looking for, or, oh God, this is what we're looking for. And if you did this, this and this, then we're really on it. And suddenly you're forging great insight in your machinery development, but also you've just made a relationship connection to your direct buyer. And so, you know, this sort of meet the buyer, meet the end user type of event in this community feels really mission critical to me to, you know, steer, support and, you know, focus the efforts. Really super.
It is, but and you know, we'd like to take it further than that, really. You know, there's one thing meeting the buyer and joining the supply chain on that one-to-one conversation, which of course is needed at a certain point from a procurement point of view, but bringing together that supply chain and community around a very specific, you know, technological or other challenge that is set by that end user also has the opportunity to stimulate cross collaboration outside of that particular machine that needs to be bought on that particular contract. So that's what I'm really interested in as well.
Yeah, super. All right, so I think we are now going to close this webinar. I really want to say a really huge thank you. These things are, you know, really hard to sort of just listen into. You know, you've been able to see Gareth or Dan or me or Ian or Aaron, but, you know, we can't see you. So I really don't know whether you know, to put your feet up or whether you're engaged. The polls have responded to. We've got some great insight from those polls. So the next steps are the slide deck will be shared with those who've attended. The poll detail, the outcomes of the polls will be recorded. The competition is being launched today, so this is where you can get ampyuk.org. It doesn't open until the 1st of November, but it is launching today. I'd like to say a very specific thank you to Ian Minton and to Aaron for their insight on machinery. And I will draw this webinar to a close. Thank you for your time, for your energy and your botheredness, if I can call it that, around machinery. Machinery really does matter. Thank you.